But that night, I didn't really have a choice. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, and my older brother was staying with friends, so the house was completely mine for 2 nights. At first, it felt kind of exciting. I ordered food, watched whatever I wanted, and stayed up later than usual without anyone telling me to go to bed. Our house was in a quiet neighborhood, not the kind of place where anything ever really happened. We'd lived there for almost 10 years without any issues. The doors were always locked, the windows too, and we had a basic alarm system that my dad insisted we use every night. That night, I remember locking everything myself. I checked the front door, the back sliding door, and even the windows in the kitchen. I armed the alarm system, double-checked it, and then went upstairs to my room. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I finally got into bed. I left my door slightly open like I always did. I don't know why, but I hated having it fully closed when I was alone. It made me feel like I couldn't hear what was happening outside. For a while, everything was normal, until I heard the first sound. It was faint, a soft thump. It came from downstairs. I sat up in bed immediately, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. I told myself it was probably just the house settling. Old houses make noises. I'd heard that before. So I laid back down and tried to relax. Then I heard it again. Another thump, this time louder, like something had fallen. My heart started beating faster. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight, even though I didn't leave my bed. I just sat there, staring at the doorway, waiting to hear something else. A few seconds passed. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, coming from downstairs. I froze. There was no way someone else should be in the house. I had locked everything. I checked. I was sure of it. The footsteps moved across the floor below me. Then they stopped. Right at the bottom of the stairs. I could see part of the hallway from my bed. Just enough to see the top of the staircase if someone came up. Nothing moved. But I knew someone was there. I grabbed my phone and texted my brother. "Are you home?" No response. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because then, the first step creaked. Someone had started walking up the stairs. Slowly. One step at a time. The sound was unmistakable. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. I slid off my bed slowly and crouched beside it, keeping my eyes locked on the doorway. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure whoever was coming upstairs could hear it. The footsteps continued. Closer. Closer. Until they reached the top. Then they stopped. Right outside my room, I could see the faint shadow of someone standing in the hallway, just beyond the doorframe. They weren't moving. Just standing there. Watching. I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to stay completely silent. Then, slowly, the door moved. Not pushed open. Just slightly. Like someone was gently nudging it with their fingers. It creaked open a few inches more. I could see more of the hallway now, and I could see part of a face, just barely. Enough to know it wasn't anyone I knew. I didn't recognize them. They were standing too still, not blinking, just staring into my room, looking for me. I stayed completely still behind my bed, barely breathing. After what felt like minutes, the door stopped moving. The person didn't come in. They just stood there. Then, slowly, they stepped back, out of view. The hallway went still again. I didn't move for a long time. I didn't dare. Eventually, I crawled over to my desk as quietly as I could and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I dialed 911. I whispered as quietly as I could, telling them someone was in my house. They told me to stay where I was and that officers were on the way. While I was still on the call, I heard something else. A door opening, downstairs. Then footsteps again, moving through the house, not rushing, just walking, like they weren't worried about being caught. Then the footsteps stopped, right below me, in the living room, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The TV turned on, loud, static. Then it switched channels rapidly. Click, click, click. Over and over, like someone was flipping through them quickly. The dispatcher asked if I could hear where they were. I whispered that they were downstairs. Then suddenly, the footsteps came back. Fast this time, running toward the stairs. I froze again. They were coming back up, faster than before. No pauses, just heavy footsteps racing up the steps. I didn't have time to hide properly. I just dropped to the floor beside my bed again, pressing myself against the wall, hoping they wouldn't see me. The footsteps reached the top, then stopped, right outside my door. The silence was worse than anything. Then the door slammed open, hard. I flinched but didn't move. I could hear them inside my room now, walking around, opening drawers, moving things, breathing. Heavy, right above me. I shut my eyes tightly, praying they wouldn't look down. Then, they stopped, right next to the bed. I could feel their presence, right there. Then they crouched down, slowly, and I heard their voice, right next to my ear. "I know you're here." I stopped breathing, completely. Seconds passed, then suddenly, sirens, loud, getting closer. The person froze, then stood up quickly. I heard them run out of my room, down the hallway, and back down the stairs. A few seconds later, the front door slammed shut. I didn't move until the police came inside and called out for me. They searched the entire house. They didn't find anyone, but they did find something. The back door, unlocked. No signs of forced entry, just unlocked, like someone had been inside long before I went to bed. They asked me if I was sure I had locked everything. I told them I was. I know I was. But what they said next stuck with me. One of the officers looked around and said, "It doesn't look like they broke in." He paused, then added, "It looks like they were already here." I don't stay home alone anymore, and every time I go to sleep I check every door twice. But sometimes, even after checking everything, I still feel like I'm not the only one in the house. The first time it happened, I convinced myself it was nothing. I was home alone that weekend. My parents had gone to visit relatives, and my younger sister stayed over at a friend's house. I had the entire place to myself, which at first felt like a luxury. Our house was big, quiet, and a little older, but I had never felt uncomfortable in it before. There was only one part of the house I didn't like, the basement. It wasn't finished like the rest of the house, just concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. We mostly used it for storage. Old boxes, tools, things we didn't need anymore. The stairs leading down were narrow, and the door at the top always stuck a little when you tried to open it. My dad had one rule about the basement. "Always keep that door closed," he would say. "It lets the cold air up." That was it. Nothing creepy about it, just a normal house rule. That Friday night, I did everything like usual. Locked the front door, checked the back door, made sure the windows were shut. Around midnight, I went upstairs, turned off the lights, and got into bed. For a while, everything was quiet. Then I heard it. A soft creak. It came from downstairs. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, listening. Nothing followed. I let out a slow breath and turned onto my side, trying to ignore it. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time, louder. A slow, dragging creak. I sat up. That sound wasn't random. It sounded like a door opening. My stomach tightened immediately. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 1:13 a.m. I stayed completely still, listening. Then I heard it again, the same creak, but this time it didn't stop right away. It continued. Longer, like something heavy was being pushed open. And then, a faint thud, like it had hit something. I knew exactly what it was. The basement door. I felt a wave of cold run through me. I knew I had closed it earlier. I always did. I got out of bed slowly and stepped into the hallway. The house was completely dark. The only light came from the faint glow of a street lamp outside, barely reaching through the windows. At the end of the hallway, I could see down toward the staircase, and from there, I could see part of the kitchen. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't see the basement door from that angle. I stood there for a long time, debating whether I should go check. Finally, I started down the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight, louder than usual in the silence. When I reached the bottom, I turned toward the kitchen, and that's when I saw it. The basement door was open. Wide open. The light from the kitchen barely reached into the darkness below, but I could see the first few steps leading down. And nothing else. Just darkness. I froze. There was no way that door should have been open. I stood there, staring at it, trying to convince myself there was a normal explanation. Maybe I didn't close it properly. Maybe it just swung open on its own. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because I hadn't just heard it open. I had heard something push it open. Then I heard something else. From the basement. A slow movement, like someone shifting their weight. I backed up immediately. Every instinct in my body told me not to go near that door. So I didn't. I walked back upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and stayed awake for the rest of the night. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. The basement door was closed, completely shut. I stood there staring at it for a long time, trying to decide if I should open it. Eventually, I did. The basement looked exactly the same as always. Nothing out of place, nothing missing, nothing moved. It felt stupid, honestly. Like I had imagined the whole thing. So I brushed it off. That was my first mistake. The second night, it happened again. But this time, it was worse. I stayed up later, hoping I wouldn't hear anything. Around 2 a.m., I was still awake, sitting in my room with the lights on. And then, the creak. Louder this time, clearer. The basement door opening. I didn't even bother going to check right away. I just sat there, frozen, listening. Then I heard footsteps, coming from downstairs. Slow, heavy, walking across the kitchen floor. My heart started pounding. There was no way anyone should be in the house. The doors were locked. I had checked them. The footsteps continued. Then they stopped. Right below me. Then I heard something that made my chest tighten. A faint scratching sound. Coming from the wall, right next to my room. I turned slowly toward it. The sound was soft, but unmistakable. Like something was dragging its fingers along the inside of the wall, moving upward, toward me. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on that spot. The scratching stopped. Then there was a soft tap, right where the wall met the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then, another tap, slightly higher this time, like something was trying to find its way through. I grabbed my phone and dialed my dad, but he didn't answer. The tapping stopped. Everything went silent. For a few seconds, I thought it was over. Then I heard something in the hallway, a footstep, right outside my door. I held my breath. The handle moved slightly, just a small twitch, like someone testing it. Then it stopped. A few seconds passed, then the handle turned. Slowly. But the door didn't open, because I had locked it. I heard a soft exhale on the other side, then a voice. Low, almost a whisper. Open it." My entire body went cold. I didn't respond. I didn't move. The voice came again. "Open it." Same tone, flat, emotionless. Then the handle stopped moving. The footsteps slowly moved away. Down the hallway, then down the stairs. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I called my parents and told them everything. They came back early. My dad checked the entire house. Locks, windows, basement, everything. He didn't find anything. But before he closed the basement door, he paused. "Did you move these?" he asked. I walked over and looked. Some of the boxes had been shifted, just slightly, but enough to notice. And there were marks on the floor, dragging marks, leading from the far corner to the bottom of the stairs. My dad didn't say anything after that. He just closed the door and locked it. That night, I stayed in my room again, but nothing happened. No creaking, no footsteps, no voice. For a few days, everything was normal, until I noticed something. The basement door was unlocked. I asked my dad about it. He said he locked it. I told him it wasn't anymore. He checked it himself. It was unlocked. He locked it again. But that didn't stop it, because that night, I heard the creak again. Except this time, it didn't sound like the door opening. It sounded like something coming up the stairs. I was 19 when this happened, and it was the first time I'd ever been alone in my parents' house for an entire weekend. They had gone out of state for my cousin's wedding, and my younger brother stayed with a friend because he had a baseball tournament. I didn't go because I had early shifts both mornings at the grocery store where I worked. That left me alone from Friday night until late Sunday. Our house sat on a corner lot with a backyard that backed up to a drainage pond and a thin line of trees. In daylight, it looked ordinary. At night, with no houses directly behind us, it felt cut off from the neighborhood in a way that always made the yard seem bigger than it really was. Friday evening started normally. I got home from work around 6:30, made dinner, watched TV, and texted my mom a picture of our dog Murphy asleep on the couch. She reminded me, like always, to lock the side door before bed. That was the door we used most because it opened straight into the kitchen from the driveway. At about 9:15, I let Murphy into the backyard one last time. He was a black lab and usually sprinted one lap around the fence before coming right back. That night, he stepped off the patio, stopped, and stared toward the far right corner of the yard near the gate. He didn't bark. That alone got my attention. I looked toward the gate and saw nothing. The motion light over the garage had come on, and the yard was bright enough that I felt sure I would have seen somebody standing there. Still, Murphy wouldn't move until I walked a few steps into the yard myself. Then he backed up and returned to the patio, still staring toward the gate. I brought him inside, locked the back door, and tried to forget it. Around 10:45, I went upstairs to my room. Just after midnight, I checked the locks one more time because I was alone and because my mom had reminded me twice. The side door was locked. The front door was locked. The sliding door to the patio was locked. I remember checking each one clearly. At around 12:30, I went to bed. I woke up at 2:11 to 3 knocks. They were not loud, but they were deliberate. Slow, evenly spaced knocks coming from the side door downstairs. I sat up immediately. Nobody should have been coming to our side door at 2:11 in the morning. I listened for Murphy to bark, but instead, the hallway outside my room stayed strangely quiet. A few seconds later, the same 3 knocks came again. I got out of bed and opened my bedroom door. Murphy was awake in the hall, sitting stiffly and facing the stairs. Then a man's voice floated up from downstairs. "Hey." Not shouted, just enough to carry. I grabbed my phone, checked for texts, and saw nothing. Then the voice came again. "Can you open up for a second?" He sounded completely normal, which somehow made it worse. I moved to the top of the stairs and crouched low enough to see part of the foyer and kitchen, but not the side door itself. Nothing moved. Murphy stood beside me, the fur along his back raised. The man knocked again and said, "Your dad said to come around here." That made no sense. My dad was 2 states away. I backed into my room, locked the door, and called my mom. She didn't answer the first time. When she did, I whispered that there was a man downstairs saying Dad sent him. She didn't hesitate. She told me to call 911 immediately and not go downstairs. I hung up and dialed. While it rang, the man knocked again and said, "I know someone's home." The dispatcher answered, and I told her there was a man outside my side door in the middle of the night, claiming my father sent him. She asked if I knew him. I said no. She asked if the door was locked. I said yes. She told me to stay upstairs and remain on the line. Then the knocking stopped. For maybe 15 seconds, there was nothing. That silence was somehow worse than the knocking. When somebody is making noise, at least you know where they are. Once it stopped, all I could think about was whether he was still standing there listening, or whether he had already moved somewhere I couldn't see. Then I heard gravel crunching, not at the side door anymore, moving away from it, toward the back of the house. I whispered that to the dispatcher. She asked if there were other entrances. I told her about the back sliding door and the gate. She said officers were on the way. Murphy growled. I had never heard that sound from him before. I opened my bedroom door just enough to look into the hall. Murphy moved to the top of the stairs, still growling, and then I heard a soft rattling from the kitchen below. The sliding door handle. Someone was trying it. The rattling stopped, then started again, harder. The dispatcher heard it and asked if that was the back door. I said yes. Then another sound came from below. Metal against metal. The side door deadbolt. Turning. I stopped breathing. I knew I had locked that door. I had checked it myself. The deadbolt turned back with a heavy click. Then the door opened. I didn't see it, but I heard the familiar scrape it made against the tile. Murphy exploded into barking. He charged to the top of the stairs, and from downstairs, I heard fast footsteps enter the kitchen and stop. Not one set. 2. There were at least 2 people inside the house. I stumbled back into my room and slammed the door shut. Murphy backed in after me, barking so hard he was almost choking on it. I locked the door again and dragged my dresser in front of it. Then a woman's voice came from the hallway. "We just need to talk." She tried the knob once. Locked. Then the man spoke, much closer now. "Open up and nobody gets hurt." That was the first openly threatening thing either of them had said, and it made everything instantly more real. The woman knocked lightly. "We know you're in there." Murphy kept barking. Then the man said something that made my stomach drop. "Your car's still outside." That meant they had noticed it before they came in. Maybe before they even knocked. The footsteps moved away from my door. I heard drawers opening in the bathroom. Then my parents' bedroom door opening at the far end of the hall. They were searching upstairs. I kept waiting for them to come back and start kicking in my door. Instead, I heard the man call from farther down the hall. "She's in here." For one terrifying second, I thought he meant my room. Then I realized he was talking about the guest room. The dispatcher told me officers had just turned onto my street. I said, "Please hurry." Right after I said that, footsteps pounded back toward my door. The knob twisted hard. Then the man threw his shoulder into it. The dresser slid. He hit it again, and I heard the wood around the lock crack. I screamed. Then, from downstairs, I heard the front door burst open and someone shout, "Police!" Everything changed instantly. The pounding at my door stopped. Fast footsteps ran down the hall and down the stairs. More shouting came from below. I heard the side door slam open. Then an officer yelled that someone was running toward the pond. The dispatcher told me officers were inside and to wait where I was. A few minutes later, one of them knocked on my door, identified himself 3 times, and told me to move the dresser. When I opened it, 2 officers came in first. Then another brought Murphy back after checking the rest of the 2nd floor. He was shaking, but unharmed. The police caught the woman behind a shed in the next yard. The man made it farther, cutting through the drainage area behind our fence, but a K-9 unit tracked him to a construction lot less than half a mile away. The part that stayed with me came the next day. A detective asked whether anyone besides family had ever had a key to the side door. The answer was yes. About 7 months earlier, my parents had hired a contractor to replace damaged tile in the kitchen after a leak. He had been in and out of the house for almost a week. Sometimes my mom left the side door unlocked for him if she had errands to run. The detective showed us a photo lineup. I recognized him immediately. He was the same man. According to the detective, he had a burglary record and had recently been working with a woman who helped scope out houses. They targeted homes where families were away or where one younger person was home alone. The reason he knocked first was to see whether I would come down willingly before they tried the key. He still had it, or at least a copy of it. That was the part that bothered me most. Not just that they broke in, but that he already knew the layout. He knew which door we used most. He knew the stairs were right beyond the kitchen. He probably remembered the sound of that side door scraping the tile before I ever thought to be afraid of it. For months after that, I couldn't hear a knock at any side entrance without feeling sick. Even now, I never answer a side door without checking first, no matter what time it is. And if someone knocks 3 times in that slow, even rhythm, I don't care what they say through the other side. I'm not going downstairs. Not for a voice I don't recognize. Not for a story that doesn't make sense. And definitely not for a knock in the middle of the night.